So welcome everybody to the Pact Mentality podcast with me, Paul Garrigan. And today I've got a very, very dear friend on the podcast who has agreed to come on and share some of his experiences and some of the profound work that he is doing in the city. So I'd just like to introduce you to that friend, and his name is Neil Meekin. Neil, thank you so much for joining me, brother.
It's amazing to be here, Paul. Yeah, it's an honor to be on your podcast and yeah, get an opportunity to have a conversation and go a bit deeper with a few things.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for coming on. And me and Neil met. I think it's almost 2 years ago, maybe. Might be a bit long.
About 2 years.
We met at a networking event, weren't it?
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, we just landed on the same table as one another and right next to one another, and just began talking and having really deep conversations, and conversations that you can't really have with the average man. And talking about all things universal. And that quickly led on to a really, a close friendship, if you like. That we both spent a lot of time together, learning more about each other and about our interests and, the things that we have in common. And, one of them is doing deep inner work, deep men's work, which leads me to, to speaking about the work that you do now and the incredible work you do. So if you could just introduce, you know, that type of work and the work that you do in terms of, the family constellations and even, more of the inner work, and let's explore that, I think, for starters, because many people aren't aware of what this even is, this profound work that you do.
Perfect. Okay. I'll give a little bit of an intro about who I am as well, just a
Yeah,
bit of because
please.
obviously I'm from Liverpool, so that's a good start. And then I'll go into more of the deeper aspects of the work that I've been doing, Paul, if that works with you.
Absolutely.
So I was born in Netherton in Sefton. And all my ancestors were from Bootle, and then beyond that was Ireland. Um, Given we're talking about obviously men's work and that angle on it, like I've never met my father, but I know of my father's family being again from Bootle, but more English. The Irish side definitely being the more maternal side. But yeah, it's been interesting. So yeah, in the adult life, I've just been like a gypsy, Paul. I've just travelled here, there, and everywhere. And as you know, I normally live in New Zealand and been back now for a couple of years. Um, yeah, and it's been interesting being back because what I came to realize eventually is that I've sort of been pulled back to the city.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I felt like there was a bit of a running away aspect of me going to live overseas, which we can touch on because it's all related to what we're going to talk about here and my connection
yeah.
to family constellations and the work. But yeah, currently residing in Crosby in North Liverpool, which is nice.
Mm,
And yeah, it's been good to be back in the city, Paul. But it's also been interesting to see and understand the culture of the city and the different personalities and the different practices and work that's going on around healing
mm,
and doing the inner work. Because when I left in 2008, 2014, there was things that were starting to happen in the city. There was a lot of yoga centers that had been opening, like meditation, like plant medicines were just starting to happen. And
mm,
then after being away overseas for a long time and living in New Zealand and coming back to Liverpool, like the difference in just those years around, like what was available, now it's huge. And obviously one of those people I came across was you doing the men's work because that was a key area for me to focus on my own healing journey was the connection to the father and the father
yeah.
line. And obviously that's where we connected and came through
Mm,
there. So family constellations, Paul, which is a key part of my work. So I've got different parts of work within my portfolio. So my professional work, you could argue family constellations is professional work, but my professional work is I'm an innovation consultant. So I work with everyone from tech startups through to governments and corporates around, taking ideas, like nurturing ideas and turning them into new products and services for new innovations. And that's been my work for a long time. I've lived and worked all over the world doing that. And I continue to do that work here. I'm currently working with a social enterprise in South Liverpool called Farm Urban. Again, healing systems, but food systems. It's incredible work. But a big part of my work is family constellations. So family constellations for me is interestingly, it's a spiritual practice and it's a way of life as well as a method for me to to facilitate that work, not just in the city, but I do wider stuff online, but certainly in the city.
Mm,
So once a month, I run a 1 day workshop in the Baltic Quarter where I bring groups of people together to work with this method called family constellations, which, as you've experienced, it's
yeah.
quite a profound and powerful method for bringing to light unconscious patterns of behavior, trauma, issues that don't have their origin within the existing reality. It goes back intergenerationally. So
Mm,
it's working with the ancestors and intergenerational patterns, based on the family, that the family's got a culture, like a company's got a culture, or a team's got a
yeah.
culture, or society's got a culture, football club's got a culture, our families have got a culture.
Yeah.
And so it's an opportunity to bring a light those patterns, because they show up in our life in a very particular way that can be conducive to us not thriving or belonging, or to be disconnected, both from ourselves, but also from our families, and also our communities and our friends. And so there's consequences. So
Mm,
for me, doing the work on oneself starts with the self, but the self within the family system, if that makes sense.
yeah, it makes absolute sense. I think so. When we're sort of looking at this, the system,
Hmm.
and obviously I done probably I didn't do a constellation, but I attended a workshop, about 12 months ago, say. And then last month, obviously I joined me, my first full workshop, if you like, and actually did the constellation myself. And, as a man who, has done a lot of inner work now, there was a big understanding. I have a really good understanding of what's happened in my life. I have an understanding of what's happened in my family. I have an understanding of ancestry, like what's gone on and why I'm shaped the way I am. But there was still something that was left unhealed, because there might have been an understanding and insight, but there was a lack of embodiment around being able to walk through that change and understand it, and how I was energetically bound to the past in how I was showing up within my family system and the place that I was taken, which was just incredible for me to obviously witness, massively emotional, and to be in that experience as well, because it's deep, deep work. But when we look at most family systems in Liverpool, for example, my system is what I would regard as pretty normal, of what people perceive as normal, in my upbringing, in terms of the dynamics with my father, suffering with his own mental illness, and he suffered with addiction. My mum having her struggles, if you like. There wasn't a lot of money, and we didn't have a lot. We had to, find our way. I was wearing my brother's Rockport that he wore in year 11 when I was in year 11. We were sort of just about, we wasn't majorly poor by any means. Maybe we had a roof over our head, but obviously within that dynamic, there's a certain culture that's created even around lack, scarcity, beliefs within yourself, stepping into roles maybe as a young man that weren't mine to step into, and being open to receiving from your parents, and they can be lost within their own pains from their own systems that they came from. And it's incredible how that unfolded, if you like, during my own constellation of understanding, the griefs and the pains and the burdens, if you like, that I was holding that weren't necessarily mine. So, how important you feel it is for us to understand that dynamic, Neil, within our place, within our family, but also, understanding the roles in which we've adopted that maybe weren't ours to adopt, but we've had to step into.
Well, they're amazing questions, Paul. Um, there's certain aspects within family constellations, like the key principles, and they're not fixed, and they're called the orders of love. And so I'm going to touch on them in a moment. Well, I want to touch on something that you said there around like this perception for us as individuals of, oh, this was just the way it was. We just had a normal family upbringing. That's just what it was. We just grew up in Liverpool. But growing up in Liverpool was hard. I mean, I'm 46 now. I mean, it wasn't hard, but when you think about our parents in a general sense, when you start to zoom out, and look at it within a wider context, like Liverpool in the 80s was quite a challenging place to be. You know, just the decline within industry. There's a lot of corruption within government. Um, you know, you look at Boys from the Black stuff that was produced during that time, like Willie Russell's TV series, and it was quite a challenging place to be. Still opportunity, but a lot of people left and went down to Bournemouth, went down to London, like went overseas. It was quite a challenging time, but you know, like you say, we never went without, but you know, it was a difficult place to be. But that doesn't mean that it's okay. And so when we look at it from a point of view, looking at the dynamics within our family system around certain behaviors or certain difficulties, or like, you know, you might have had a father who was there, but he was in the boozer every night of the week after work, and sort of he wasn't there, or he was generally drunk. Maybe he got a bit of time at the weekend, but he was often playing footy. So they were there in physical form, but absent emotionally. So it's important to factor that in, that it's actually not normal. And what happens when you come into a family constellations workshop is that we call it widening the lens. So we've got our story based on how we've been brought up, about how we see life, about how we see our mum, how we see our father, our grandparents, our brothers or sisters, our mates. But that's only one truth. So coming into family constellations, it widens the lens about looking at things in a much more holistic and much more truthful way. But you touched on something where when we're going into this work, you said you understood it. But you understood it, I would say, in an intellectual way, which is the realm of the mind. But when we're doing deep work, you know, we can touch on people like Gabor Mate, and we look at like somatics and the work of the body, and we're working in with the intelligence of the emotions and the body and the feelings and the sensations. It's the feminine, and you could argue that's where the truth lies. So when we do constellations, we could understand things theoretically, but when we move into the body, which is what we do when we work on family constellations, we're working with a different intelligence, and that's where all the truth resides. So when we start to get into that and realize, hold on a minute, okay, I can understand theoretically that I've got a relationship with my dad. Fuck, there was consequences for that. And so when I get into the feelings, like I realized that for years, I don't mean me, but like I'm using it as an example, is that I've been running away from these emotions. And when I actually go in there, it's like, whoa, there's all this anger, like there's all this rage, there's this sadness, and all of a sudden I can tap into that and move that through me and get an emotional understanding of what's happening within my situation. Now I realize, okay, I could theoretically understand that things weren't quite right, but now I can feel it. And when you feel something, Paul, everything changes. So
Yeah,
does that make sense?
absolutely, mate. It's powerful. I think, you know, the way I would word it is, you know, my dad's passed, if you like, but if I closed my eyes and tuned into my body and thought of my dad, something would happen in my body. There would be a felt
Mm,
resonance, something would start to pulse. And that would obviously be the imprint of my dad, and obviously, you know, the download, if you like, and the encoded information I've got of my own dad will come to life. And I think, you know, that can be said for thinking of your mom. It can be done of thinking of what's happening in the world. We have to close our eyes and feel into what's going on in the world right now with the, you know, it's chaos, things are collapsing, things are breaking down. And what's my felt experience of that? Because so much of our time we spend in the mind, and we spend intellectualizing everything, that we forget
100%.
to come back to the wisdom that the body holds. And certainly with men, there, like I work with men all the time. You know, so much. It's my work. It's my purpose to help men understand these things. But a lot of men can, you know, like I mentioned where I was at with my own understanding of constellations. They can understand that something might have happened, but at the same time, they don't want to look at it, and they sort of think, well, I don't really need to look at the past. I don't need to go into the past. You know, I'll just focus on the future, focus on where I am now, and focus on where I want to go. So it's sort of like there's a frozen impulse, and you know, a looking away of not wanting to own or include the things that happened, that we sort of deny our experience. But then denials of our experience are driving us today. They're driving our decisions. They're driving our family dynamics. You know, it was personally in my family, like there's people who aren't talking. There's like and it's not spoken about. It's just sort of like it's accepted that this is our family. Oh, such and such isn't talking to such and such. Oh well, oh, this is just the way they are. They've always been that way. But it's like, but that's not okay. It's like we shouldn't be falling out all the time, and people shouldn't be isolated from the family. Um, which is certainly elements of that have played out in my own life, if you like. I've always felt, I mentioned on the constellations we did, there was like an element of me always being like this little bit of a rebel or this little bit of a black sheep that would always be the one to maybe get in a little bit of trouble or go off the rails when I was a bit younger. But there was a reason for that. There's a reason that we can go against the system because you're the one to maybe see the things that aren't going correctly, that are going unsaid, that are going unspoken. And I feel like that has been a catalyst certainly in my own journey and understanding that my view is like everybody, Neil, your view is unique to you.
Yeah.
But to ignore your truth and to ignore your body is to actually ignore wisdom. And that wisdom is giving you signs of what needs to be looked at. And that's what I found came alive for me, certainly in the constellations practice in terms of understanding, my own relationship with my mum and how that is, how that can play out in my relationship with my partner.
Yeah.
Like this closure to feeling empathetic sometimes and like a coldness can show up where you're not truly feeling people, but you're intellectually understanding that there's something wrong and that you're intellectually holding them, but you're not feeling them. And I think women really feel that, don't they? Certainly in our intimate relationships, and even your mum, like they will feel that closure, won't they? And that happens in the body, so it takes a lot of understanding on an embodied experience to be able to tap into them dynamics, doesn't it?
100%. And that's where family constellations is amazing. And that's where it was the game changer for me, Paul, is that like I was very sensitive as a child, but like as we become older, like that through conditioning, that can be shut down, like as we get older and we do like the work like family constellations and obviously the different practices that you do, once you start to feel, because this is what family constellation does as a practice, it's like you're building the muscle of feeling and sensation, and we can go into more detail with that. It's like once you can feel, everything changes. Like everything changes. Like I can't even look at a piece of rubbish on the pavement now without feeling gutted, because like through disconnection, people haven't even had the opportunity to, or like thought, okay, well, this is going to have a consequence if I just throw me rubbish on the floor. Like, why just put it in the bin? It's almost like I know it sounds really daft, but it's like a symptom of disconnection, where there's a disrespect for like the culture and the society that we live in. Never mind what's going on, obviously, in the Middle East, when you feel things, you have to change. And so we live in a society that's perpetuated by, like, we're almost like cut off in many ways, in a general sense, from the head upwards. We just don't feel we're kept in the head, and through like obviously phones. You have to get on the train into town in the morning and everyone's in the phone. And that's the culture we live in, and like obviously drinking and alcohol and etc. It's all around coping and not feeling. But then when you feel, that's when the true change happens, because when you in a relationship with, like, say, with your partner or with your mum, and maybe before you'd shut down, but all of a sudden you start to be able to feel, and you can feel the consequence of your actions, you'll change because you'll feel a discomfort in your body. Do you know what I mean? And that's what family constellations as a practice really helps you do. Like before we come on the call, you were talking about it being a spiritual practice, and it is in a way, because it's like you're moving into the intelligence of the body. So as you know, there's a bit of talking when we do a workshop, but mainly we're working with feelings and the body. And I want to come back and reel back to something that you said before. So one of the exercises that we do at the start of a workshop is that we do a meditation, and we get everyone to close their eyes. And almost as a ritual, we ask people, well, I ask people to visualize the father, the mother, the father's parents, and the mother's parents. And I ask them to feel into what's that like. And what can happen is it's almost like a way of you being able to calibrate where each person is in relationship to the parents, is that you'll be able to feel, if you all of a sudden you put your father behind you, you might have thought about him for a while, or thought about him in a particular way, you'll feel like a resistance. And then towards your mum, you'll feel like maybe a deep like love or a longing or a pull. And like you're able to feel what your relationship's like in a very, very clear way. Or it might be a grandfather. Again, like you might feel like a disconnect from the father, but you feel a really strong connection to your grandfather. And that gives you an indication of the type of things that you need to work on in terms of the threads within the family system. But that's a feeling thing. It's not an intellectual exercise. Do you understand?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, fully. I remember, having a conversation with you once, and you were asking me how I felt, and I said, I think I feel, and you were like, you think you feel, like can't think you feel a feeling. How do you feel? And that always brings me back to, we can't necessarily intellectualize a feeling. It's just it is that this is the truth of what my body's doing, and so much of the time we try to escape from it. But equally, I want to lean into something a bit deeper when I say this is, you know, what can we inherit? Like that is passed down, if you like, because we can inherit felt experiences from ancestors. We can inherit felt experience from our mother, from how, pregnancy was and a relationship with your father. What are the things that we can inherit in understanding family constellations, Neil, and like obviously the burdens that are passed on to us that might happen more on a epigenetic level, if you like, and an intergenerational level. What you feel that things are in terms of the constellation system and how that can show up in sort of inherited patterns or behaviors or burdens.
Yeah, great question again. I'm going to ping it back to you just quickly because I imagine there'd be people on the call who don't know what epigenetics are. So would you
Yeah,
just give it just like a couple of lines and then I'll go into the question.
they put me on the spot there, aren't you? So my understanding of epigenetics is how the environment shapes the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with the environment, if we're brought up by our parents who are then shaping our worldview based on their interpretation and perception of their worldview, then we're essentially going to be looking at a similar environment to what they did. So epigenetically, it's going to be passed down from generation to generation, which means that basically, we're going to inherit the same type of lifestyle, the same type of patterns, the same type of, unluck. We might have unluck in our life, and we might have, someone was abused further up the line, and there's a pattern that can happen in family dynamics, and some for some reason and for some unseen energetic reason, potentially epigenetics will absolutely play a part in it. Is we end up living in a similar way, if you like, or similar things happen to us in our life, which could be why we get different diseases, why we get different sicknesses, why you can never pick the same or the right husband, or you always go for the wrong man. There's reason why these patterns happen because our worldview, if you like, and our perception is tainted because we don't come to this world clear, which can be said in some spiritual, teachings that you come clear when you're a child. No, you don't because you come with um, already inherited information, which can come from your ancestry, can also come from collectively, and it can come from your soul. If we want to go even deeper, that we come with a karmic imprint, that then is ours, if you like, to work through in our life. Now, until we understand what we've arrived into this world with, over the as we step into manhood, we're going to continue to repeat the same patterns epigenetically, have the same diseases, have the same life as the people before us, but the past wants to find integration so it doesn't continue to repeat the pattern. So we have sort of my understanding, again, is we have an obligation to change the past because your ancestors are trying to find healing through you. That's my understanding of epigenetics. So
That's amazing. I mean, I'm glad I asked you and I didn't explain it. It's you've explained it in a great way. And another part of it, and I'll use an example, is you talked about the environment, and I'm going to use Liverpool as a context. So, from an epigenetic point of view, and just for the people who are listening, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's quite well known in certain circles, he talks a lot about epigenetics. And it's interesting because the social enterprise that I'm consulting for at the moment, the MD, has got a PhD in epigenetics, and we've had a couple of conversations. about it, where the environment has a massive impact on, say, for example, our ancestors. So in Liverpool, and certainly Bootle specifically, is that Bootle was the most bombed place outside of London during the Blitz in 1941. And so the guy who developed family constellations, Bert Hellinger, he would say, like, if you were born during wartime, you're automatically traumatized. And then if you've been through the war, you might have been on the front line, the women who've been left behind, like where they've been bombing. And so certainly Liverpool, from that perspective, was severely impacted by war. So that makes an imprint epigenetically on the genes of each of the people within the city. And it affects people. And some people, it mightn't affect them at all. Other people, it's been heavily affected. Like in my own personal experience, that back in late 2016, I was involved in a massive earthquake. And it had an effect on me and got some PTSD. So you could argue that's affected me. So I have to be aware about how that shows up. But going back to Liverpool, like if you think about that as a ripple effect, where from the war, you've got men who are coming back broken, these from the front line, then coming back into normal society, whatever normal means, then what you'd find is then there's a lot of maybe alcoholism and absence, like emotionally unavailable, shut down. And then they're having kids who are the baby boomers, but they've got a father who, in a general sense, collectively is shut down. So what then has an imprint on them, and then obviously then the baby boomers have like the likes of us, and so that then passed down. So you often see within Liverpool is where you got fathers who are quite absent because their fathers were absent, and they're only learning how to be a parent because of how their father was. But if he'd been through the war, then that's going to shape how he shows up as a man within a family system. And so when you've got an absent father, what can happen is, if you're asking me for an example, is that like he might be away, he might be in the pub, and then you've got your mum who's at home. What can happen is if there's a son or there's a couple of sons, one of those sons will then step up into the vacuum and adopt the role of the husband on an emotional level. And so the mum will then rely on the child to be the husband, which then means that that child then has to grow up more rapidly than what they would within a well-balanced family system. So what can happen is that like that child, then when they grow up, they are taking on a role or a patterning of an adult when they're still haven't had an opportunity to be a child. And so you get like these sort of men who are mature in one way, but very juvenile in another way, because they had to step into a particular role because of an absent father who might have still been in the house, but was emotionally absent. You see what I mean? So these are the type
Yeah.
of things. So the balance of the family system intergenerationally is always, like you say, it's looking to become integrated, and it's seeking wholeness. But if there's a vacuum or if there's something missing, it can cause issues within the family system that will show up as toxic dynamics or unhealthy patterns between the parents and the children, which then in turn, this is why we do family constellations. I've got to say, be the change, be the change to break the chain. We want to break those patterns, otherwise then they will automatically start to show. Because like you said, we've inherited a worldview that's not relevant into the system that we're in, but that's how we see the world, based on epigenetically and culturally. It's being passed down through our parents just teaching us how to be a kid based on what they were taught.
Mm.
But it's not relevant no more. And so then we pass them on to our kids. And then we've got to break those. We've got to break those patterns. Like you say, there's an obligation, but there's got to be an awareness that this isn't normal. And to be able to feel that this isn't normal, to be motivated and catalyzed to make the change. Until you feel it, you're not going to do anything about it. Unless you're aware of it, you're not going to do anything about it. And so you might
Mm.
be a woman, for example, who's getting into these repeated patterns of relationship styles because you're unaware of, like, oh, hold on a minute, this has come from the way I observed my mum getting into the same patterns, which, funny enough, was based on me nan getting into, not my nan, but the person's
Yeah.
nan, getting into the same patterns because of a
Mm.
trauma or an issue or someone who's been excluded 4 or 5 generations ago.
Mm.
Make
Yeah, it
sense?
can absolutely, Neil. I think it can drive like can drive toxicity on both sides of the spectrums of masculinity, femininity, and how
Yeah,
men
yeah.
um, objectify women. It's normalized, very normalized in society that men objectify women, and then equally women can repel men. As in, there's this movement that can happen of femininity to hyper feminine, but it's actually driven by masculine, if you like, that women are competing with men. And we've only got to look at the dynamics of what's happening within the system of the family unit, sort of an attack on the family unit. Both people are being made to work and overwork, if you like, and that's then having an effect on children that are growing up. But the underlying currents, if you like, and energetics that are driving the system and driving people how they show up in their home life is unresolved, unconscious energy that is trying to find resolution. I even look at how young boys operate, and it's normalized that there's gangs on the street. It's normalized that the streets are now unsafe for our kids. Like when we were younger, there was lots of kids on the streets, but my parents used to say it wasn't as safe as when they were kids. And now when I look at my kids, it's now like you won't let them out the street, and my lad's 12 and you're not allowed to go far on his own. But it's become normalized, and nothing's really happening to change it. It's sort of like a normalized abnormal thing in terms of the violence that we're seeing. And then in terms of relationships breaking down, I think over 95% of men that I work with, I would say, have had some issue with their father. Like it's so prevalent in men that there's been some sort of issue. And I love the way you mentioned about, the war generation, and we're sort of in the ripple of that now. There's like this ripple movement of
100%.
men struggling. There's men taking their own life. There's families breaking down. This pain is trying to find resolution and expression. But
And
we just
integration.
sort of an integration, mate. Yeah, absolutely, an integration into the system of a man, into the individual, firstly. Which is why I do believe, Neil, that there is absolutely an awakening process happening. I think men are becoming more ready for this type of work. There's definitely a thirst I feel amongst the men I work with, and a real hunger to make change, to be better men, to be better fathers, to meet their partners with more love and empathy, and to chip in a bit more, maybe in the house, to be there with the children, at certain events, and there's another swing to that, though, Neil, which I'll touch on with my own personal experience, but with a lot of men I see also, is maybe because of the things we didn't get, we hyper give, and we sell our truth out to be at every single event, to overwork, to have more money because we had nothing, to maybe be very passive with women, like not step into our, leadership and authentic masculinity in the relationship dynamic. That we become really passive and yes men to the whole, to the whole dynamic of how we're showing up as men. What would you be your views on how men show up in that dynamics, Neil, and how we get the polarized man. Something I said to the men a couple of weeks ago on a call was, do you hug your partner and your kids because you love them or because you need love? Yeah.
Okay.
Where is it driven from? Are you doing it because you need love, or are you doing it because you want to show them love because you love them? I'm not saying you don't love them, but are we always hugging, kissing our kids because we feel so alone, empty, and like we don't belong? Yeah. So it's sort of like was a powerful thing that landed with the men.
Yeah, and imagine it would have landed on a feeling level.
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
it would have had impact, because when a truth is spoken, it lands in a very particular way. Not intellectually, though there is an intellectual aspect of it, but it lands in the body, in the feeling. It's interesting, Paul, because someone made a comment, a woman the other day, about a comment to me. It sort of triggered it a little bit, and it was
Mm,
just around masculinity and femininity. And it's just important to note that we're not talking about men and women.
yeah.
Masculinity and femininity are sets of of like behaviors and characteristics, and often people can get caught up in like it's like men and women, but it's not that.
No,
and
yeah.
and and the reason we can do a whole podcast about that, probably for about 4 hours, just about that very topic. But it's interesting with the men, because what I found was the gateway into me exploring deeper aspects of what it means to be a man, was I had to dive deeper into the feminine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which the feminine is which is feeling, like nurturing, like empathy, like working with the right brain, like it's like imagination, like really visual, like what's going on. And it was the feminine, and it's the feminine that opens up the masculine. Do you know
Mm,
what I mean? Like what you touch on there about like you're hugging someone because like it's because you need it or because you're genuine, and it's like that's feminine. That's the feeling. It's the nurturing.
mm,
Well, and where are we within our own selves? Because, like you say, the hypermasculinity, I've been there. I was a workaholic. I must have burnt out probably 4 times, I would say, quite badly, because of there's a pattern in me around wanting to be seen because I was unseen by my father, you could argue. When I've done the work, that's what's come out. So it drives
mm.
particular types of behaviors around hyperactivity. Not hyperactive, like I say, kid running around, but
Yeah.
hyper activity that come in the form of work, where I would use work as a form of like validation about I am somebody, but it was driven by the absence of a father and not being seen. But it took me to delve into my feelings to understand, okay, well, this is what it is. I could
Mm.
intellectualize it, but it was working with more feminine aspects for me to understand that. Because often
Yeah.
that when you do men's work, often it is initially hyper masculine or it's very masculine. But then like working through like your program that I've been on,
Mm.
we delve deeper and deeper. And as we delve deeper, we come more into the feminine. And that's when we start to get the realizations and the insights and the felt sense and the expression of emotion, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, Neil. I think when we're talking about them dynamics, like them dynamics live within all of us. And Carly, if you like, can take the masculine pole in certain dynamics in the relationship better than me. So if we had to plan something, if you like, which is a masculine dynamic to lead, she will take that pole because she is better at planning. So I will be the one to receive in that moment and be the one who's open to receiving and be led in some capacity. But then there's other areas that I play into my strengths, and I take the masculine pole in the dynamic. Certainly in terms of with our kids, I take that dynamic. I'm the one who will create order in the house. I'm the one who will create the discipline. I'm the one who will maybe be a little bit more structured and directive with my kids and what they're doing, their own routines, and getting them to step up. Certainly with having young boys, getting them to understand, what it means to be a man, because I'm their compass point. They're looking at me to set the bar for what a man is. So I'm helping them and understanding, this is your transition from boyhood to manhood, and this is what's to be expected of you. In terms of, being ready for the world, while not, taking the childhood away from them, and equally allowing them to be the finest expression of themselves, if you like. But yeah, really touching on that dynamic, I think it's important to find that balance within us, because a lot of men um, like to only identify as masculine, as in I'm masculine. I go to the gym, I get the ice baths, I do the breath work.
Hmm.
I'm doing my work, and I'm doing everything's really hard all the time. It's like pushing into this pain. But I wonder why we're pushing into that pain, what we're trying to escape from. And that's where the learning is, because it's like when we're going into this hyper overdrive, so many men there that work with me are burnt out. They've got no space in their life, can't juggle the family life as well as, the success that society has told them, what success is for a man, to have the money, the house, the cars, the family, and their family dynamic can be breaking down as well as their own internal dynamics. They're breaking down mentally, internally, the nervous system's completely burnt, and they lack this, awareness and depth, and being able to ground their energies, both masculine and feminine, and learning to understand when to call upon certain energetics, if you like, and equally, by giving themselves a map. And the thing I love about the work I do and what you do, Neil, is the work I do provides men with a map. This is a map. This is a universal map that works and what has worked for me. And equally, Constellations provides that type of map. It's like it's another map that can just help people to self-inquire and realize more about themselves in order to step fully into the person that they want to be through doing some deep inner work, if you like.
Yeah, you touched on something there with the family constellations aspect of it. If I could, if it to distill it down, I mean, it's now that I've been doing family constellations for a few years, I see it's much more than the family. It goes really deep. But if I could distill it down, one thing that it gives you more than anything else is self-awareness. And through having self-awareness, again, self-awareness can come from the intelligence of the body and the feeling, to then, bringing in into the intellectual understanding of it. Once you've got that awareness, you can change. But like, if you haven't got that roadmap, which is what your work can provide, you might become self-aware, but like, okay, I'm self-aware, but like, where do I go now? Like, what's next? Like, what direction do I move in? Like, I can appreciate where I am, and like, okay, I can see how this is playing out. I can see where it's come from, like intergeneration. You can see how like my relationship with my father's played out, or my mum, and how it's playing out now in my family and in my work. But like, where do I go with it? Like, what is a healthier vision for me to move towards that is not all this superficial things that like are perpetuated within society around what success looks like. Like you said, systems are collapsing, like the world's burning. Like, what's your role and what do you do to step up? Is it to go and get a brand new Land Rover? That's not what I subscribe to, Paul. And so what happens is, then you've got to be prepared for this, is that when you start to come online, you'll experience a radical shift in what you perceive in terms of reality on a day-to-day basis, and you'll realize that, I mean, I'd argue that you've been sold a little bit of a lie around what it means, what success means. And then obviously with your work, you can help provide a roadmap for that around, okay, this is the way. Do you know what I mean? Showing them a different way of being than what we've been sold by the media and by life,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
an
I love that,
economic
mate.
system. Yeah, it makes sense.
I need to think, it's something that I'm really big on, Neil, is teaching men. It's more about your internal. And that we could whip this back to epigenetics, by the way, in terms of, yeah, your environment has an effect on shaping you, but we have the beauty of self-awareness. So the beauty of self-awareness allows us to perceive an environment before we're in it. So if you get that good at perceiving an environment before you're in it, you can change how you show up in that
Definitely.
environment. So my little boy goes to a maths class and hates maths. Hates maths. What do I say to him? Are you going to go and punish yourself for a whole hour hating maths, sitting there flooding your body with harmful chemicals and stress hormones that are going to make you sick? Or are you going to think ahead of the environment and switch on the genes that are going to keep you happy when you're in that classroom, and practice being happy while you're in the room, and get your state in an elevated state, because you're not going to change the fact that you've got to go and sit in maths, unfortunately. So he's thinking ahead of the environment. So I'm trying to teach him to think ahead of the environment. If you're going to see your mum and the same arguments keep arising, if you're not thinking ahead of the environment of how you can change and look at yourself and internally, you're creating your world, because the world doesn't happen out there. The world happens in you. It
Totally.
happens in here. Yeah, it's not happening out there. Things are happening, but your interpretation of it is it can be dangerous, this, Neil, and how some people perceive the spiritual path and saying everything's an illusion. No, I disagree. Completely disagree with that. In the yoga culture, they call it Maya. So everything is Maya. So Maya means illusion, which doesn't mean that everything you see is fake. It means that you're painting the picture with the illusion of your interpretation and perception. And you get to choose that based on epigenetics when you wake up to the fact that it's you who can control and understand what dynamics are showing up unconsciously, and how can you move forward and change from this point.
I want to do a bit of a disclaimer at this moment in time. So these are beliefs that these we've got to be like careful that these aren't absolutes.
Yeah,
But these are systems that like I subscribe to them, Paul, what you're describing. I've done a lot of work over probably nearly 30 years now, and there's many ways to skin a cat. But ultimately,
absolutely.
it does start with us. but it's just encouraging people. Like I was taught years ago to be a walking question mark, and I can see the journey you are on, and I've been on, and we learn these things. But in the simplest way, it is starts an inside job and how we shape our reality. But there's many different ways that we can move towards understanding. Hey, there's not one
Mm,
absolute, like this is the way. There are many ways, and it's important for us to find our own way in how we understand, how we perceive, and how that perception is conditioned, from the
mm,
society and the environment, and like you say, epigenetically around us. And that's where the self-awareness comes in. Yeah, I'm conscious not to go with my explanation too abstract and to try and keep it as simple as possible. It's almost like how it can, it's almost like we're conditioned like a computer. And then what happens externally to us presses buttons within us that creates a response. But those responses are conditioned. And you can sort of get into the realm of the ego where that conditioning takes place. And I believe that there's an aspect beyond that, like you said, the soul, without getting too fluffy, that the ego is there is almost like it's a part of us, but it's not us. And it's important to
mm.
understand that aspect of it as well, is that as we do the work, and as I've done more family constellations work myself, because I practice what I preach, I realized that the ego is an aspect that has its place, but we live in a society that's perpetuated by being led by the ego rather than what's beyond that, which what the practices that you just described help us to understand. I would say that's my belief from my
Yeah,
experience.
absolutely, Neil. And I mean, it's not to say, I think, just to clarify, it's like, yeah, everything's happening in me and how I perceive the world. That's not to say that something horrific is happening and that you're meant to perceive it in a happy way. I think that would be bypassing something that, is a big element of, like, you could say, oh, just see the world as happy. It's not that simple when things are happening in certain parts of the world. For example, what happened in Southport here a couple of months ago, to just turn a blind eye and say, well, I'm going to be happy. And, I'm going to ignore the fact that something's happening in my city so close to home. And I'm just going to focus on, it's me who's creating this. That's a bit of a misinterpretation and a misunderstanding. It's not you who's creating that event, but how you choose to respond to that event can create a positive or the most positive outcome possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, really well said. You said something there, and I felt something in my body just come up. I want to touch on it.
Mm.
Is the concept of bypassing, and this is a perception, and I see it quite widely. Is that the certain tools and methods, and I'm hopefully not saying this as a judgment because it's not, because I've done a lot of these practices. Is that we talk about going deep and doing the inner work. And there's a
Mm.
lot of things that are propagated that give the perspective and the perception that the work is being done, but it's very surface level. And so that, I mean, breath work, for example, what you do, like meditation, like the tools to get you there. But there's often ways where it's like, okay, well, I go and do Reiki or I go and do this. It's almost like a form of bypassing where it's like, okay, I'm doing these things, tick, 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 but I'm actually not going deeper into the work, which I'd argue, like when you do your group work, Paul, and when you bring men together in community, because like, one of the things about society is that where what I feel is a movement towards separation, whereas we need to be connected as a society and people. Is that when you bring people together in community, we can go deeper into the healing process through certain other practices that are not just about doing meditation. Meditation is a way to get you there, but people perceive, and I've had experience of a conversation with people that when they do come into, say, a family constellations environment, it's like, now I realize what doing the work is really about. And you've also got talking therapies and stuff like that, but it's often there's a lot of these things that are out there that aren't allowing people to go deeper into the inner work. I don't know what's your view on that. That's just my perception.
Yeah. Lovely put, mate. I think you put it amazingly. I think there's levels to working on yourself. I think,
Yeah.
there's a nicely dressed little dicky bow, little, cherry on the cake. I'm going to do a little bit of work. I'm going to go and sit and do meditation for 20 minutes. Yeah. That will open the doorway for you doing inner work. But equally, I think, I know people who've done 63 ayahuascas and they're still doing it. Like, but they've never done any embodiment work. They lack presence. They lack understanding about trauma. They lack understanding about their own system, family systems. They're still doing it all the time. And I'm like, try something else because it's not working, and you keep doing it. But you're not understanding your own system more deeply, that it becomes a bypass, that I'm doing the work by taking a substance. And my understanding, Neil, is that if we're always looking for something external, the work happens internally. It's an internal thing. So if you're looking at something externally to fix you, to heal you, to give you something, you're looking for something outside. And true healing for me and the inner work lies within. Um, so when we're looking at different, you could say spiritual practices, healing practices, breath work, for example, can become a bypass because I'm doing 3 rounds of Wim Hof every day. Wim Hof might necessarily be driving you away from looking at your pain because you're doing your Wim Hof to feel good. Because when you're not doing it, you're not feeling good. Even exercise, you're doing it and you have to train 5 times a week because when you don't exercise, you feel a deep rooted pain that you don't like. So you have to go to the gym to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But then we can bypass it by saying I'm healthy, I'm doing my tick list, I'm reading my book, I'm doing everything I can to feel good. Okay, but what about understanding the parts of you that don't feel good? Because that's where true wholeness for me resides, in understanding that there's two sides of life, like the as within, so without, as above, so below, light and dark, black and white, masculine, feminine, sun and moon.
Yeah.
It's understanding, there's both sides of life, and we're not whole until we can shine a light not only in the light, but we can also shine a light on our darkness individually, ancestrally, and collectively. I think that's true work. And if we're not doing that, whatever you're doing, it may be little tools towards it. But I think, we're all on our own journey. It's like peeling the layers of an onion. And I think when people get to, certain levels of work, Neil, some people are sometimes ready for the next level, if you like, but some people aren't. So it's not on me to project. Everybody needs to do work with Pact,
Mm.
with Paul, and you need to do what I do. You mightn't necessarily be ready for what the commitment requires, for the work that's needed, and for the depths that you're going to be asked to go to, while equally going to greater heights. But I am of an understanding, Neil, is we can only go as high as we've gone low. So yeah, we need to feel deeply in order to feel greatly. So the more we can feel deeply into ourselves, the more empathetic we can be, the more we can be in our
Mm.
body, the more we can embody a balanced masculine and feminine energy within us, allows us to then, step fully in to our full potential, if you like, by embodying and embracing all aspects of who we are, and rather than trying to get rid of these parts that I don't like.
Yeah, yeah. Just as you're talking, my mind went to a couple of things. Like, you think about like the Carl Jung, who we both know about, and like shadow work and the importance of the shadow, and really getting into the darkness and the depths and the shit. Like in family constellations, we talk about within us, we've got like the perpetrator and we've got the victim. So the
Mm,
perpetrator is the one who can kill, can do bad things, but also the person who can be a victim, and we can be both. We don't know in certain contexts what we can do. We say, "Oh no, I'm a pacifist," but put me in an environment where like my family's at risk of being like murdered, and I've got a weapon. Like I'm going to kill someone. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
I'm going to do something about it. But one of the other things that came to mind in a lighter note is that there's a quote by Rumi, and in a who's an ancient Persian poet, and one of the things he talks about is the greater and the amount of heartbreak that you have in your life, the greater the capacity for love. And it's like only when you start to experience a lot of adversity, and not that I seek adversity, I've had quite a bit, I've traveled and done a lot in my life, is that as I realized that the more adversity I've experienced, the greater the capacity I have to be able to hold more opportunity and love. And it's like, I'm not saying to seek out difficult situations, but we can find ourselves in these very superficial, very narrow situations in life where we think we're feeling. But until you experience some level of like challenge in your life,
Mm,
that you can really understand and appreciate what it actually means to be whole, to be able to hold both.
yeah,
Makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah,
Powerful, mate. Like,
yeah.
you know, a really simple way that I like to use that, Neil, is noticing when you're contracting.
Yeah.
Yeah, notice when you're contracting. So when it could be in a relationship, having a conversation with your partner, and there's like, "Oof, contracting here, and something's happening, and I'm trying to get away." could be out around a certain type of person, might be your boss, and there's a contraction around them, and it's sort of like, I can't include you. Yeah, which is the way that separation comes in. Like, I can no longer include you in as a
Mm.
part of me. I need to get away if I don't like you. And the more we can include people, the more we become whole, because we're not separating ourselves from the people that we dislike. Because at the end of the day, there's, however, 7, 8 billion people on the planet. That's not all going to go your way. Yeah. So we're creating our own suffering by expecting everybody outside of us to be like us and to operate in the way that we say, and for every car to not pull out and drive as we tell them to drive in the way that we think it should happen. And when it doesn't go that way, we then project, you should have done this, you should have done that. But can we just include the fact that equally someone driving like a bell end brings something up in me, and I'm going to allow that. But equally, I'm not going to kill them for it. I'm going to allow it to happen, and I'm going to include that experience as a part of me, rather than maybe guilting myself for getting angry, or, cursing at the man and chasing him down the road, ready to pull him off the car, which, you see from time to time.
It does happen. It's beautiful, Paul, because like if you can distill it down again, it's like we have got an opportunity as human beings, and I know this has took a long time for me to get here, but like you can grow as a human being with the beauty and just the reality of everyday life, like what you're describing there. So like with a level of self-awareness, if you meet someone or you see someone and like they irritate you, that's a gift, because okay, what part of me is being irritated by that person's behavior? So what part of them is also part of me? Because you're irritated by something that's within your system somewhere, and like they've given you a gift of the irritation. It's like, wow, okay, I recognize that. It's not about them. They're the facilitator of this irritation within me. Where's that come from? Like to do a bit of inquiry around, okay, why do I feel irritated? Why am I choosing to be irritated in this moment? Now, if you think about the course of a day, like if you're going to work and then you're coming home to your family, or you're seeing your mates, or you whatever you're doing on a day-to-day basis, you maybe feel good in some ways, but where you're feeling irritation, it's a massive gift, because life's a mirror constantly. And if you've got enough sense of awareness and appreciation of that gift, you can use that as food, as an opportunity for you to sort of see, okay, what is that in me? Like, where does that come from? And then when you
Mm,
understand it, it changes. All of a sudden, you can choose your response. So this is
mm,
the opportunity as a human being on a day-to-day basis. You don't have to go to an ashram in India. I don't mind pointing over there. India's over there, Paul. You don't have to go to
because
an
I'm
ashram
going
over
in
there.
July.
You don't have to do that. You don't have to go to any special place. Like my spiritual teacher that I follow for many years, G.I. Gurdjieff, he's dead now. He talks around like the fourth way, but it's been in reality on a day-to-day basis. Just when you wake up, you've got an opportunity to grow. You've got an opportunity to be aware, like, and you've got an opportunity to be able to utilize all what's happening around you, just in normal life, for you to grow spiritually, emotionally,
Mm,
intellectually. Do you know what I mean? If you approach it in that way. And I sort of
yeah.
ask people who may be listening to this to try it. Just wake up in the morning and think, okay, what am I? Set the intention. Whatever happens to me today, or whatever I choose to respond to today, or whatever comes across my path today, that's a gift. And what have they got to teach me? And just do it for one day or 2 days and just notice. Just
Mm,
notice. It's
yeah.
profound.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sort of like the analogy I use, Neil, a lot is, it doesn't, when someone triggers us, a lot of majority of the time, I'll be in the 90% here. It's not about the moment. Yeah. That anger's lived there before, and
Yeah.
it's just triggered it to come alive.
Yeah.
That argument with your partner that you keep having, that's the same as it was 6 weeks ago. It's come alive again. Yeah, that somebody's doing something to trigger something unresolved in you.
Yeah.
And when we see it in that way, that wound becomes a gift. That anger becomes a gift because we can reclaim it. Yeah,
100%.
yeah. Love it, brother. Um, so what I'd like to finish on then, Neil, is just some final words from you, brother. This has been amazing, by the way. I feel like we could go on for hours and hours, mate, me and you. And I think I've enjoyed it that much, mate. I want to do it again. And we
Cool.
can do it on any topic that we choose. I think it's been amazing, mate, and really educational and informative for me and for the people listening to it. But I think just some final words on, from you, how to work with you. and yeah, on what's coming, mate.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks, Paul. So yeah, as I say, I run workshops once a month in the Baltic Quarter in Liverpool. See, these are in-person workshops, run from 9:30 till 5:30. And I've got the next workshops coming up this Saturday, which is the 5th of October. So it's always the first weekend of the month.
Mm,
So come along. It's capped at like I normally cap it at 10, no more than that. So it's really nice and intimate. Create a really strong container. It's very safe, and we go very deep into the work. And as you know, when the person that comes into that workshop is different than the person that comes out the other side, just because of
mm,
the depths that we can go to. So the beauty of constellation work is that no matter what, you will see your own family system. So like whether you're a client who does your own constellation process where you look at an issue in your own family system with the group, or whether you get chosen to be a representative of that person's family member, or whether you're just an observer, you'll see your own family system. So it just is the gift that gives in every way. So I encourage people to come along and just experience it. It's really profound, and you're doing yourself a massive investment in yourself and your own self-awareness. And it's obviously not just for men, it's obviously for women. And interestingly, last workshop there was more men than women for the first time. It's very rare for that to happen.
yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm up to. But yeah, follow me on Instagram as Neil Meekin at the Pool of Life. You can also get me on Facebook. And yeah, just follow me and just keep an eye out. I've got a newsletter as well, so maybe I can give you the links and you can include them in the comment section on YouTube. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, Paul. It's
Mm,
an opportunity to go quite deep because we've looked at family constellations, but we've been able to really zoom out and zoom back in, and hopefully it's not being too abstract for people. But
yeah.
fundamentally, it's around becoming self-aware, because when you become self-aware and you can feel, then the changes can be made.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously I was part of that last Constellations, brother. I just want to touch on, it was incredible to see. And like I said, Jordan, a podcast, there is a real thirst among men. Like it's happening. There's a real thirst among men to step into this type of work and to get into the deeper work. And it is a real heroes and warriors journey, isn't it, Neil?
Yeah.
It's for the brave, it's for the bold, it's for the courageous man who's ready to go all in on himself and understanding, how he's creating his reality, how he can, not pass things on to the next generation, and how he can live, the best life possible, for himself. So, mate, like absolutely incredible podcast, like incredible, mate. Lots of information and education for me to take in listening to you, Neil, as always. And I massively appreciate your time, brother. So thank you. And when I can track you down next, mate, over the next couple of months, and depending on where you're at and where we'll do it again, mate. But I think just an open podcast, and just talking, on how we see the world and all things men's work, feminine, feminine work, trauma, everything. Like we'll talk about everything, brother. Plant medicines. Oh,
Well, on the table. It's great. I appreciate it, Paul, and thanks for giving me the space to be able to sort of, as I say, just expand out a little bit more beyond than just the sort of the fundamentals. So yeah, keep doing the amazing work that you're doing with the men, and yeah, it's amazing to see what you're doing with the current cohort, and yeah, just keep building the movement, mate. It's really needed. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I look forward to joining you in the future. So thanks, Paul.
definitely, brother. Definitely. We'll be working together again soon, mate. Don't worry. I'll see you
So
soon, brother. Yeah. Thank you
all
so
the
much,
best.
Neil. Cheers, brother. Bye
See you,
bye.
Paul. See you later.